Hi everyone, Gary back again. I thought today we'd take a look at a module that I think is absolutely brilliant, something that you should definitely, if you get the opportunity to run or play in, you should definitely take a look at, and that is this. That is Sailors on the Starless Sea by Harley Stroh, and it is for the DCC Dungeon Crawl Classics. This is kind of quite seminal as a module for doing a particular format of adventure really well. This particular copy is a kind of anniversary edition. It's hardcover. Most of the DCC modules aren't hardcover; they're like little soft like paperbacks. It's hardcover. There's some extra content in it, but also it's kind of got this like nice foil on the front. It is wonderful, this adventure, and it is one of the best introductory adventures for role-playing games, not just old school role-playing games, but role-playing games in general that anyone could kind of possibly have. So let's just kind of jump right in, shall we? What happens in this module, what the through line is everyone in the group is playing what's called a funnel. And a funnel is great. It's something in DCC, in that role-playing game, where everyone generates 4 or more level 0 characters, which are basically level 1 characters with no equipment or very little equipment and 1 hit point. If they get hit by anything, they die. And they have to kind of deal with some inciting incident. And a funnel is a way of, it's kind of like playing the traumatic backstory. You create 4 characters, you pass them out to your character, you get your players to generate 4 characters, they pass them out to each other. And then what happens is those individuals, those level 0 characters that survive the funnel, kind of graduate to becoming first level characters. It's brilliant. It's not something you want to do every single time, but it is a really fun thing to do. Quite often. Like it's not something that gets really boring. But you do need an eye for the kind of adventure you're going to run. You can't just run a funnel as any kind of adventure. And what the through line for Sailors on the Starless Sea is thus is that you are all villagers who have grown up in the shadow of this ruined keep. And there's strange lights there. There's like very kind of Morcockian, kind of Warhammer-esque beast men and mutants like living in this keep. They occasionally grab people, drag them off and sacrifice them. And what's going on is that beneath the keep, there is a vast underground sea with an island ziggurat in it. And on top the ziggurat, there is a kind of chaos warrior. There's someone ensconced in their armor. And the beast men and their cultists, they don't understand why they're doing this. They're kind of being manipulated by the forces of chaos, but they're sacrificing people at this ziggurat. They actually sacrifice them by chucking them into the top of it, which is like a kind of burning cauldron. It's great. It's like, oh, this is like exactly what I want. They're kind of like very Robert E. Howard, like really kind of like good sword and sorcery stuff. They're sacrificing people, and they're reaching the point where they're going to have sacrificed enough people to have to resurrect this chaos warrior, who is this kind of like almost kind of like demi demon that's kind of like locked inside their armor. It's brilliant stuff. DCC has, when you create stuff for DCC level 0 characters, when you create a funnel, Dungeon Crawl Classics has these like enormous, I don't know if you can see that, these enormous tables of, I think it's D100, yeah, D100s. And I'll just read you a few, right? These are the kind of things that you generate. Rope maker, you start with a knife and you have 100 feet of rope. That's quite interesting. Cutpurse, you start with a dagger and a small chest. Halfling mariner, you start with a knife and there's 2 yards of sailcloth. A baker, you start with a club and a pound of flour, right? Really kind of like mundane things. But what this does is that it encourages new players. And I've run this before for new players. It encourages them to not be just kind of looking at their sheet for answers. They're not looking for kind of abilities. They're looking at, oh, I've got this equipment, and logically, how can I use this to try and get out of the situation? And all that stuff ends up being used, or much of it ends up being used in ways that you'd never expect as a game master. So before we get into what I really like about this, let's just talk about my bona fides in regarding Sailors on the Starless Sea. I've started to do a few of these videos. I think it's important to say that I don't want to ever review anything or talk about anything that I've not run, because I think that the way that gameplay emerges at the table, there is a quality to that you can't talk about if you've just read it, obviously. And there are qualities to games that are very different when they're actually run and experienced, as opposed to just simply read. So we'll talk about Bookcraft. Everything I'm going to talk about, I have actually run this. So I've run this twice before. I've run it as a level 0 funnel both times, but not for Dungeon Crawl Classics. I ran it as a level 0 funnel for Old School Essentials. And that was for about 5 characters. And that was for a one-shot. That was for characters and players who didn't expect to keep these characters after it. and that produces something slightly differently as well. And then the other time I ran it, it was for Journeyman Expert Master, my old school role playing game, and that was for 4 players, level 0 again. And that was with an eye for moving these characters forward in that setting and kind of like kicking off the campaign. And it did that, and that campaign's still running, and it's brilliant. So let's just talk about this. Let's talk about the big ideas. I mean, you open it up. It's by Harley, Stroh. Everything that they write is absolutely wonderful. Like honestly, the best. I'm currently running Stroh's "The Music of the Spheres is Chaos" DCC module 100. You open it up, and there's this gorgeous Doug Kovacs art. So this is a D9 table. DCC has all these weird dice, but it's 9 different illustrations. These kind of like really grungy watercolor of the different beast men that they can encounter when they go into the fort. But also you get this full color illustration of the fort. But what's great is like, look at this. I hope the camera picks it up properly, because look at this color palette. It just looks like sick. Like it looks disgusting and grimy, which is exactly communicated through the aesthetic of the mapping. That is exactly what you want to communicate. It's really grungy when they get in here and they're being kind of clubbed to death by, you know, like beast-headed and dog-headed animals, or dissolved in this like slime thing that's in the chapel. It's all about, it's grisly, it's slightly kind of Vancian, it's evocative of Michael Moorcock and Warhammer, that kind of idea of chaos versus law, that kind of, you know, informed by Poul Anderson's writing, that sort of chaos, and it's grungy, and it's like, it's just everything that I want. What there is there's 4 or 5 locations on the surface. There's a couple of things where it feels like, and this is no bad thing for a funnel, there's a couple of things where it feels like opportunities to just like harvest a few of these, like slim these characters down. So for example, if they climb up this ruined entrance into the keep here, there's a chance that the stones that they're climbing up fall down, and like I said, if they take 1 point of damage, someone gets hit on the head, they die. But what's really, really, really good fun about this is when they get into the tower and they can see all their, what would be their characters' kind of friends and neighbors and people that they know kind of all strung up, and it ends up in this kind of really grisly fight where everyone's throwing spears at each other and fighting, and everyone's trying to get the upper hand, and both sides are kind of dying. And that doesn't really happen in fantasy role-playing games. Usually what happens is, even though it might be fraught and characters might die, for the vast majority of the time, it's not that kind of pitched battle. It evokes, or it produces, a really satisfying sense of combat and sense of like frenetic energy when you play these encounters. So anyway, they make it into they clear out up here. There's a really horrible trap as well in the kind of temple that's there. There's effective, I can't remember exactly what kind of pudding it is, but there's basically some kind of like slime monster there that can devour people. It's great. It's like really, really good fun. There's a well that leads straight down to the Starless Sea here. I've never, in the 2 times I've run it, they have known that both parties have tested to see how far, you know, that stone falls if they drop something in. I'm like, you just can't hear anything. It falls so far that you can't hear anything. And they're like, oh, wow, this is dangerous. And you just need to kind of keep pressing them on deeper and deeper and deeper. Like they're peeling back the layers of the onion, like what's going on here? And everyone playing it knows that the vast majority of their characters are not going to survive, but they also know that they want at least one of them to survive. So what happens is you end up where you sort of force certain characters, not play certain characters to be like the party door opener because they don't know what's going to be around the next corner. Then they go down for a series of chambers, one of which is a kind of like slime pool full of slime, I suppose. It's kind of like a strange kind of bath, I suppose, a kind of like a chaos chamber, and then they get to the Starless Sea. And what's going on the Starless Sea is there's like a Viking longship. There's like a boat nearby that they can take to this ziggurat with this kind of like vast, endless black infinitude that stretches out, this enormous cavern all around them. They can get on it. There's a couple of magic items that they can find. There is actually in this book, there's an extension to the module that extends the bit immediately underground, like the kind of like the beneath the keep. I've not run that. And the reason for that is that I think that would work better if you were using this not as a funnel, if this was just kind of like a module that you're dropping into your campaign, your setting. Oops. But there is actually an extension. You can kind of stretch out that bit a little bit longer. I've not done it. So they get to the Starless Sea, they get on the boat, and what happens is there's this absolutely brilliant encounter where effectively this sea monster, kraken, serpent thing comes up, and they have to kind of, you know, appease it, otherwise it'll sink the ship as they're on the way to the ziggurat. And you can describe the kind of the strange cacophonous cries and ritualistic dancing going on this kind of like this pyramidal structure that rises in the center of the sea in the distance, and they know they're heading towards danger. But anyway, the sea monster comes up and they've got to find some way to appease it. One party drove it off and managed to attack it and drive it away. And then the second time, it was brilliant. One of the characters, they decided, because it was all really, really silly, because funnels just naturally are. And I think this format of fantasy role-playing games, we all know it strains into a kind of ridiculousness. They had upstairs, because they were like, oh, we might need something at some point. One of the characters who had died had been speared by a beastman. They cut his heart out and they were carrying his heart. One of the characters was like, oh, this character, he like collects hearts. And they're like, oh, I'm going to give the sea serpent one of these hearts to see what it does. And it was like, yeah, that's fine. That's like pretty evil. That's like, I'm satisfied with that. So they get to the island, and it's effectively 3 tiers going up to this massive molten burning pit. It's covered in beastmen that are all dancing and like engaged in like depraved kind of like ritualistic kind of ceremony. And they're throwing imprisoned villagers into the pit at the top. And if enough go in, then there is also this enormous, like 9-foot tall statue. It's not a statue. It's the remains of this chaos warrior that had once conquered these lands, and his body's been stored here. It's his armor coming back to life and his soul being drawn back to his body. It's brilliant. And that's the individual who's on the front, this kind of like one-eyed lord. Like I said, it's really evocative of Woofer. It's really evocative of Warhammer for me. It's really evocative of Michael Moorcock, this kind of like really weird strangeness. Slightly gonzo, but it's great. So they got to fight their way up the pyramid. Or sneak their way up the pyramid, rescue the villagers, and then maybe even destroy the armor, maybe throw it into that pit or whatever. The way I always do this is, I think the statistics are given for Dungeon Crawl Classics and for the Beastmen, but I don't think at this particular moment, there's so many that this is necessarily the best way to run it at the table. I think if you were comfortable using kind of an extended test, or some kind of skill challenge, a number of successes before failures, maybe melee tests to kind of hack their way through to the top, or stealth tests, and then sleight of hand checks, or kind of a picklock checks, so those kind of things to like rescue the villagers. That will allow you at the table to do this with some kind of cinematic momentum. I always think it is great to just tell them you've got maybe 3 rounds until the last villager that's needed to go into that pit goes in, and just roll a d4, and that's the number of rounds. And if they don't do it, that chaos warrior comes back to life, and then they really are in for a world of pain. Both times I've done it, it has resulted in one of the characters sacrificing themselves at the end to grab the kind of suit as it comes, as you can describe it, kind of like jerking back to life, thrown it into the kind of fiery pit. Then what happens is the roof shudders and it starts to come down, and you get this. This is brilliant because you don't always get this with old school adventures, but you do get it with Sailors on the Starless Sea. Probably because it's meant to be so instant. It is meant to be a funnel. It's meant to be for this particular purpose and do this one thing really, really well. You get a grand climax as the roof collapses and they got in the boat and they've got to kind of get out through a kind of narrow cave to kind of like a surface river. And again, you can do that as I always run that. I run that both times as a kind of skill challenge, right? Okay, anyone got like boating as a skill? Anyone got kind of like strength to kind of like grab the rigging? Anyone who's holding onto the wheel? Like, do you want to roll dexterity to lash down lash everyone lifelines? Like as it not lashes in whip, as in lashes in tie. Everything down and tie everyone to the mast so they don't get swept overboard. Really, really, really good stuff. And then just like sapping their hit points, seeing if anyone survives. It has been absolutely brilliant. Both times I've run it, so I've run it for about over 2 groups, maybe 10 people. Every single time they have said, "This is one of the best adventures I've ever run. You should definitely go out and buy this." And as ever, it's got all the kind of great lights. If I pronounce these names wrong, please, I apologize. But it's got this great artists like Doug Kovacs, Stefan Powag, loads of other people. There's even some Russ Nicholson art in here, like the great grandmaster of kind of grimy fantasy. There's all this wonderful art that you get with Dungeon Crawl Classics. One thing that often I see as a criticism of DCC modules is that they're not laid out in the kind of modern like OSR style. I think that's like a lot of nonsense. I think that this is brilliant. No space is wasted. In many places, the map and the art bleeds into the text, and actually, providing good, well-written box text. It's italicized box text, like descriptions for each area is really, really, really helpful. One thing that Harley Stroh always does in all of his modules, I find, is that where he does the box text, what that does is it allows you to, if there's something kind of like slightly, I don't know how to put it, like awkward or cheesy, it gives you the license to say it. So you can say, well, I'm just reading the description, right? And they're like, oh yeah. And in doing that, it legitimizes that particular description. It legitimizes that particular feeling I want. But yeah, I mean, here's the this is the back end papers. Wonderful picture of that when they enter the town. They see all their kind of like village of friends chained up, and all the weird beastmen attack them. I mean, this for me is role playing. This is what I want. So I'm not sure if this is still available, but you can definitely still get Sailors on the Starless Sea. It must be one of Goodman Games' like absolute best. It must be one of their best selling modules. Go and buy it. Go and run it as a funnel, because you'll absolutely love it. And as ever, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me. You've been a pleasure, and we will speak again soon. Thank you.